But I wanted to start by going back to earlier in the day. Donald Trump has got this strategy for blowing up the DNC. And in fact, he bragged about it yesterday. He bragged about how, you know, every day he's been able to disrupt the news cycle for the Democrats. They say I'm not supposed to campaign while they're having their convention, but here I am campaigning, right? It's like the guy can't start a sentence without I. So listening to this yesterday as Donald Trump asked a foreign government, now, you know, whether it was Russia or China or North Korea or Germany or France, I don't care which government it is, a candidate for one of the two major parties in the United States of America called on a foreign government to hack the computers of the Secretary of State of the United States of America. Now, Steve Israel, who used to run the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, I'm not sure if he still does, but I think he does. But Democratic congressman from New York, Steve Israel had, this is clip number 9, had this to say about Trump.
Well, that borders on treason. I mean, never before have I heard of or seen a candidate, not just for president, but for anything, invite a foreign spy agency to hack America's computers.
There you go. So, you know, a lot of people are shocked by this. I would like to point out, and the Democrats are way too, what's the word? Thoughtful, considerate, care about the future of our nation, gentlemen and women, whatever, to point out what I'm about to point out. But I'm telling you, if this had happened on the other side, if a Democrat had said this, and if a Democrat had the skeletons in their closet, if the Democratic Party had a skeletons in their closet that I'm about to share with you about the Republicans, then the wrath of God would have come down on Donald Trump yesterday. So what am I talking about here? What Donald Trump did by calling for a foreign government to hack the computers of the State Department, basically, and Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State. What he did was arguably treason. And, you know, there's a long history in the United States of our being very upset about that. I mentioned yesterday the XYZ affair, and, you know, maybe you've had an opportunity to Google it or look it up or read about it. It's actually a chapter about it in my book, What Would Jefferson Do? Or at least there was when I wrote it. I don't know if it made it into the final book, but I remember writing the chapter. I remember reading the whole thing. It was fascinating, Jefferson's papers, where, you know, back in the late 1700s, they thought that that the country of France was trying to mess with our elections. And it just infuriated the founding generation. Infuriated. But this is not new. Treason by a Republican presidential nominee is not new. It started with Nixon, as far as we know. I mean, it might go back way before that, but I have a hard time believing that Dwight Eisenhower committed treason to become president. Or for that matter, even, you know, Harding and Coolidge and Hoover in the 1920s. I doubt that they committed treason. I think they just ran their campaigns and they got elected. But in 1968, Lyndon Johnson had negotiated peace in Vietnam, successfully negotiated peace in Vietnam. And Nixon learned about it. And the CIA was wiretapping the South Vietnamese, and they came to Lyndon Johnson and they said, Richard Nixon's people are talking via Anna Chennault, the representative of the president of South Vietnam. Richard Nixon's people are talking to the South Vietnamese and telling them, don't go with the peace deal. And Lyndon Johnson called up and this was just released a couple of years ago by the Lyndon Johnson Library, and no Democrats pointed it out, which astonishes me. I've been pointing it out over and over on this show. Lyndon Johnson called up Everett Dirksen. Those of you old enough to remember, Everett Dirksen was an honorable man. He was one of the last of that generation of honorable Republicans. He was the Senate majority leader. He ran the Senate, a job that Lyndon Johnson used to have. And he called up Everett Dirksen, and this was the conversation they had.
Here's the latest information we got. The agent says that they just talked to the boss in New Mexico. And that he says that you must hold out. Just hold on until after the election. We know what Q is saying to them out there. Yeah. We're pretty well informed on both ends. Now, I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know.
And they oughtn't to be doing this, Everett. This is treason. Oh, I know. And then there was a whole series of conversations, and you can find them over at the Johnson Library. So Richard Nixon committed treason in 1968 by involving a foreign government to blow up the efforts of a sitting president to bring peace to Vietnam. And had that peace happened, it would have saved some 20,000 American lives and probably 1 million Vietnamese lives, not to mention Cambodians and Laotians. The second one was Ronald Reagan in 1980. When the hostages were taken in Iran, Abdul Hassan Bani Sadr ran for president of Iran in the summer of 1980 and won on a platform, as he said, as he wrote for the Christian Science Monitor. He said, I won the election with over 76% of the vote. He said, I openly opposed the hostage taking throughout the election campaign. He says, I was deposed in June 1981 as a result of a coup against me. After arriving in France, I told a BBC reporter that I left Iran to expose the symbiotic relationship between Khomeiniism and Reaganism. I told Khomeini and Ronald Reagan had organized a clandestine negotiation, later known as the October Surprise, which prevented the attempts by myself and then President Jimmy Carter to free the hostages before the U.S. 1980 election took place. The fact that they were not released tipped the results of the election in favor of Reagan. Two of my advisors, Hassan Nawab Savivi and Sadr el-Hafazi, were executed by Khomeini's regime because they had become aware of the secret relationship between Khomeini, his son Ahmed, the Islamic Republican Party, and the Reagan administration. And this became what we refer to as Iran-Contra. We, by October, before the election, the month before the election, we were transshipping via Israel spare aircraft parts, specifically tires, to Iran. And for the next 3 or 4 years, we were selling illegally, under the table, illegally, in violation of sanctions. The Reagan administration was selling weapons to Iran in exchange for them holding the hostages until the minute that Reagan put his hand to the Bible. So what Donald Trump is doing in committing treason, using a foreign government to manipulate a U.S. election, is part of a proud Republican tradition.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.